Welcome to another episode of Faith in Media with me, your host, Carla, and I'm so pleased to have our guest with us today, Belle Tindall. Belle, thank you so much for joining us. How are you today?
Oh, I'm so good. This is such a fun way to spend a morning. So I'm loving it already. I'm good. How are you?
I'm really good. Like you, I live for a good conversation, so it's
Oh,
it's
yeah.
nice to have someone that's probably going to have a similar energy today in today's conversation.
Yeah.
Like there's so many amazing things that when we've looked into your background, we know that you're a writer,
Mm.
you are a reporter for the Centre of Cultural Witness, you're a podcaster, and huge congratulations on the recent completion of your PhD. This is amazing.
Thank you so much. I know it'll take a while to sink in. I still feel like it's just a big prank that someone's playing on me. I don't know when that wears off.
Is that because it feels like, from what I understand of others that have gone down the PhD route, it just feels like this never-ending
Oh my
commitment
gosh.
to
Yeah.
a massive undertaking, and there is like, when is the end in sight? Is that what you're alluding to by that?
Oh, 100%. It is long. And then all of a sudden it's like this mad rush, the most stressful few months of your life. And then it's done. And everyone congratulates you. And you're like, what? It's a very jarring transition. And if you're really silly like me, is what you do is you start a new job before the PhD is done.
Oh my.
Oh, just don't do it. Learn from my mistake and never do that.
No, that's quite a big kind of like, actually, don't just share your resume really, but like tell us a little bit
Mm.
more about yourself that we don't know, that's kind of shared with us in kind of like public space.
Oh yeah, what a lovely question. So I'm Belle and I'm extremely ordinary and boring. And I found
I
myself
don't
in
agree.
I found myself in these amazingly interesting spaces and I'm like, oh wow. But yeah, so I'm from a tiny, tiny little corner of Wales. Yeah, I'm from the west coast of Wales, Pembrokeshire, and I only moved out of there very recently, and so a lot of who I am is shaped by this little bubble of community down there. Um, and I've always been a Christian for starters. I should probably put that out there first, but then, and I'm sure we'll talk a lot about that. But I've also always been just a real lover of words and writing and communication and just a massive nerd, really. And yeah, just never hid it very well. And so the writing and all of that is nothing new to me. I remember being a teenager and getting all of my friends to write really awful devotionals I'd written.
This is a
Oh,
great game from one geek to another. This absolutely resonates with me. But I think you
oh,
at
love
next
that.
levels, writing your own devotions. This is a new breed. This is a
I'm,
new breed.
I know I'm not proud of it, but I am. I remember I used to like read them and be like, I'd quite like to write those. This is like a 14-year-old loser. Like,
No, I love it so much.
yeah, so writing has just been something I've done for as long as I can remember. Not just writing either, like speaking, just words. Any way I can get words out, I always have. The new part is that now people read it. And now people listen. Like that's the new part that I'm still working out. But yeah, so I've always been a bit of a Bible geek and a words geek in general. I've always read a lot. I'm really selling myself. I have a lot of friends as well.
Just
I'm
to
really
make
good
sure everyone
fun.
feels comfortable about
Yeah,
who they're listening to. I am normal. It's okay.
I'm normal. I'm really good fun. Like if you ever meet me, I'm such a laugh. I won't still make you read my devotionals. But yeah, so that's sort of a little bit about me.
That's amazing. And like your doctorate sounds super
Yeah.
fascinating. You've got a specific focus on
Mm,
feminist critical readings of
mm,
Jesus' interactions with women.
yeah.
Huge, huge. Can you unpack that a little bit for us? Like, what does that mean?
Yes. Yeah. Oh, how nerdy do you want me to get? I can
I
go.
mean, like, just go from maybe like those that maybe have never heard of that concept to those that
Yeah.
might be familiar with it. Feel free to give us, I don't know, a spectrum of what
Yeah.
it would mean.
My favorite type of conversation. So when anyone reads the Bible, they do not come at it neutrally. That's impossible to do. We can't do it. No one can do it. If anyone claims to do it, be very wary of them. Can't do it. And so what happens sometimes is what we do is we kind of claim a bias and then instead of hiding it, we really amplify it. So, and then that leads to like these little disciplines in biblical studies and theology. So for example, someone might read it to do some liberation theology, like specifically what does the Bible say about enslavement and then freedom and liberation. Someone might do that post-colonial theology, Black theology, climate justice theology, where people are going to the Bible with specific slants, specific questions they want answering. Usually it's because it has something to do with their personal identity, but not always. But that just tends to be the way the cookie crumbles. And so for me, feminist theology is one of those. It's one of those slants. It's one of those intentional upfront biases where I'm going to the Bible for questions about what it means to be a woman and what God intended when he made women. What does the Bible say about the role of women? All of that sort of thing. But where I've gone really specific is I went straight to the bullseye. I went for Jesus. I wanted to look at Jesus's interactions with women when he came into contact with them in his life. How did he act around them? What did he say about them? How are the gospel authors, and I'm in John in particular, how are they writing about these women, and then putting it in context? How revolutionary was that for the people reading those texts for the first time, for the early church? And it kind of goes from there. So yeah, that's what my work has done, among other things. I kind of Trojan horse feminist theology into my PhD a little bit. I was like, I'll do a deep dive into John and his like compositional strategies and him in his context and him in his culture. And then I was like, and I'll put a chapter on feminist theology in there just for me.
That's what kind of sparked that area of specific focus for you? Why that?
Yeah.
Like you said, the Bible it's never ending in terms of the slants we could actually perceive it and go into. I need to look at it through X or Y lens.
Yes.
I think it's never ending, which is what I love about it. If people had ever had questions about its relevancy, about humanity and its kind of like engagement with the divine or just purpose, the Bible is just unending. But why this area for yourself?
Yeah, I agree. The Bible, I just love it. And I think that sounds like a silly thing to say. Of course, I love it because I'm a Christian, and so I believe it is changing my life. Every time I crack it open, I believe whether I feel it or not, it's changing and shaping who I am. But also, I love it as a literal book, like a literary library full of genres and just beauty. As a words nerd, I love it for that reason as well. But yeah, so I think maybe when did I get into feminist theology? I think I definitely sit in the camp of because it relates to me. So I grew up I just always loved the Bible, as my embarrassing story about writing devotionals attests. I always loved doing deep dives and digging into it. And I've always loved telling people what I found in there. And then growing up as a teenager and then a young adult, that was met with varying reactions. Some people didn't think I should be doing that because I'm a woman. I have endless stories of experiences.
I'm really hoping you're going to share some of those because it's an ongoing conversation.
It is an ongoing conversation. And yeah, so I've had people sort of on one end where it's just people just don't like it. I've been going up, and this was actually in a church context where I was about to give a talk, and I've had someone who was praying for me before the talk started, and he prayed that people would not be put off by the fact that this was coming from a woman, and that wasn't ideal, but that people would deal with it. So I've had that. And then on the other end of the spectrum, I've had people who, even when they compliment you and they say, oh, that was so lovely and so great, I've still had people say, that was great, but I don't think you should have done that. I don't think you should be up there doing that. I don't think you should be doing theology. And it's not, I never want to vilify those people because what they think they're standing for is a biblical stance. What they truly believe that. The thing is that I also believe I'm residing within a biblical stance. And so I've had to journey that and battle that. And at times that has been really, really hard, particularly because, like I say, I loved the Bible. And so as I was feeling more opportunities coming my way, and as I was doing these things, writing these things, speaking in these contexts, I was feeling the pleasure of God. Like I was feeling, oh my gosh, God, you're letting me partner with you in this, and it's such a joy. And like I'm all right at it, I'm quite good at it, and I know that hasn't come from me, so that must have come from you. So as the joy of finding what I felt I was meant to do was coming, so with the absolute continual like questions and challenges about that, and people actually using the Bible, the book that I loved so much, to tell me that I shouldn't, if you know what I mean.
Absolutely.
So it just came from a point of view of, yeah, so it just came from a place where I was like, right, I've either got to lean into this or and look those passages straight in the eye and chat to God about this and process. And turns out I really did do that to the nth degree. Or I got to stop because this is too hard. And I chose the former. And that is, that's how I got to that place. And also I really work my butt off for women around me as well. Like, this is not a me thing. I've come into contact with so many women who have stories that are far worse than mine, or have had conversations that have broken my heart because I've seen how much it's broken theirs. And I do it for those women as well. Like, God really gave me the opportunity of 4 years to do the deep work, to go and do the deep dive. And I feel like if I can come up to the surface with encouragement and empowerment for those women, that's what I'll do.
I absolutely love, I even think that the way that you framed, even narrating your experience is so honoring and so respectful. And it's a space that we do need to lean into, is that tension. You're absolutely right. This is an ongoing conversation. It is a complex one. It is a sensitive one. It can be very heartbreaking, but at the same time, there is much joy. I think what blesses me the most is that your acknowledgement is, as I understand that those who are from the other side of the spectrum, that is opposing to my stance, are coming from a genuine faith. They want to do what's right, and it's biblical, but so is mine. And can we come together and reason is the space where we should be sitting, to be able to hear one another. And also, like when you spoke about, but I feel and I sense, and I have got tangible evidence of God's affirmation of what he's called me to do in my life. And lo and behold, if that's not the sincerity of my intention, then God, show me. Even the way that you've described that is something that we can all aspire to. I'm not going to get the full picture. I'm not meant to. I'm going to come in with my biases that are still in the four corners of the comprehension that I've been gifted at this season of my life. If we can come to the table in this space, I feel that there might be more compassion and grace for all of us, even if I may never understand where another person may be in their pursuit of really going through the Bible. It's like you're going through the Bible, you're going to the source, you're looking to Jesus. Let us continue at that place and see what happens. And I believe that if that's our heart intention, he will meet us there. And just listening to that, and I know that anyone that comes across this conversation, I hope that they're inspired just by that approach and that frame.
Oh man, that's so kind. Yeah, I agree. I think there are too many, and it's not just with feminist theology, it's with any conversation where we think, well, the people who disagree with us, they obviously just don't care about the Bible. And it's like, oh gosh, that's so not true. They've done their work and they've come to a different position than us. And I can't say that I've always done that perfectly. There have been times where I have absolutely raged, and there have also been times where I've been an absolute mess in front of people and God. Mostly he's really had to deal with a crabby Belle more than anyone else. And so it's not to say that I've done that perfectly, or that understanding has always been my instinct. But 100%, I think, like you say, these conversations will never go well if there's not honor involved on both sides. But also really, really recognizing that for some people, that people will come to these conversations with different emotional weights in them.
Sure.
So what I found was that some people, men, they would come at me in these conversations, and what they wouldn't realize is when they are telling me that I'm wrong theologically, they're telling me that every experience I've had of God affirming me is in my mind, that it can't be true, it can't be real. And so I think as well, remembering that, coming to the table and honoring that people have done what they believe is real scriptural work, but also honoring that there is some emotional weight, that there is testimony involved in these conversations, and to not dishonor those either.
Wow. I don't think I've ever heard someone describe it in that way. And I think that's really valuable to hear, that where we are in spaces of disagreement, we need to be mindful that actually be careful in how we even engage in a disagreement. Let's step down with the concept like you just described. I was not there when God spoke to this person. I can't be the person to be the police to say this is or isn't. It's not my place to do that. But I've never heard that's really, really true, to consider that we need to think about the psychological impact we're having by telling people that our long-standing relationship or testimonies have now become nullified because we're in a space of disagreement. Is that our place to be doing? That's a huge question.
A huge question, one that I don't have the answer to. But yeah, that's where I've had the most heartbreaking conversations with young women in particular, where they've said, I felt so called to this, and they've looked back over their lives and they've seen God lead them up to this moment, and then they've had one conversation where someone has said, but you're a woman, so you must be wrong. And where they've been tempted to look back over what God has done and where he's brought them and question them. And that means questioning God's character. Yeah. That means questioning who God is to them and who they are to God. So to be really mindful that, like you say, that when you are shooting someone down with, quick, snappy, low blow theological darts, what you could be tumbling within them is more than a theological argument or a debate or a belief. It's their history with God. And like you say, who has the right? Who has the right to do that to someone?
And your area of, I think, focus with what you've done in your research is, we've alluded that this is an ongoing conversation. There will always be space for it. How do you see this area or this conversation developing or evolving as a result of even your contributions to it at this stage, within just the big kind of remit of what this conversation does in Christianity, in our ways of approaching Christianity?
Yeah, what a great question. I fear a little bit that and it's not just Christians, it's just the world, that as we are becoming more and more polarized, and actually we're getting comfortable in polarized positions, that actually much work that has been done over the last 10, 20 years in particular will sort of be stripped away. That's a fear of mine, but that's not a very hopeful fear. My way more hopeful answer to that is I think that what's happening with, I think the Gospels in particular, actually, which is where I do my work, is I think people are really going back and looking, specifically. I had the utter joy of meeting Tom Wright recently. And he's written the most beautiful chapter in his book, Surprised by Scripture, all about women. And that was such a joy because he didn't have to do that. If you know what I mean, he didn't have to do that. He's a theological heavyweight, he's the man. And I think he knew that if he did a chapter on this, it would carry real consequences for him, but it would have real beautiful consequences for people like me. And so he wrote a chapter, and I was able to thank him for it, which was, I was actually really embarrassing. I did not play it cool, but we'll put that aside. And I was able to talk to him about it, and he was like, I'm shocked that this is still a conversation, And I was like, oh, but I know it, but it really is. But what he said was that for him, where he came to it was that he went straight to the resurrection. Right there at the resurrection, there is a woman who was the first person to witness the resurrected Jesus, and then the first person to actively be commissioned. Now go and tell people what you have seen. And for him, he couldn't get past the power of that. And I think that might be what's hopefully happening, is that people are like, oh, do you know what? This is not just a can women preach issue. This is not just a can women lead issue. This is a gospel issue. That right at the heart of the gospel, the first person was a woman. So actually, if we want as many people in the world to come to the good, the true, and the beautiful news of the resurrection, why on earth would we bench 60% of the witnesses? Why would we do that? Actually, right at the heart of the gospel right at the heart of Eden. Like, so God's blueprint, which, you know, the resurrection kind of is a beginning of a returning to that, like, is this harmony between the sexes. And that in itself is like this proclamation of the wholeness that Jesus' resurrection brings. So I think that maybe that's what's happening. That's what I hope will continue to happen, is that people who don't have skin in the game, like, quote unquote, like I do, are like, no, hang on, we do. Because this is a gospel issue. This is a gospel movement thing. We want as many people to feel equipped and empowered and supported to be telling people about Jesus. And if the first one of those people was a woman, then maybe we should think about how we're treating women who are doing the same thing now.
That's really, really good considerations for thought. I love that. And I'm definitely going to ask you for that author again, because for my personal research. But in terms of, it sounds like you yourself have gone on a journey in your pursuance of finding and seeking, both through your research. In some way, would you say that it has impacted your own walk in faith? What has that done for you personally?
Yeah. Oh, 100%. And not in the way, well, it's twofold. The more I've dug into the passages of Bible, either where women seem to be empowered or the ones that are constantly used as like tools to bash women down, the more I've stared those down, what I've found is that tension, particularly when you're in the Bible, and actually this isn't just to do with women in leadership or anything, this is to do with any time you come to a piece of Bible that makes you feel a bit queasy for whatever reason, like where it's tense and it's not as easy, there is an invitation in that moment to stay. And what I found is that on the other side of the most tense moments can be the most intimate moments with God. And that's not because he always gives you the answer or the clarity or because you can do away with your questions or your confusion. Most of the time it's because you find that he's staying right there with you. So I think actually that's how it's been most formative, is as I've sat somewhere, I've been invited to stay close to God, to, you know, I absolutely love that Job, you know, in the book of Job, the biblical book of Job, which is one of those places where you're like, oh, this is, you know, this doesn't sit as comfortably with me as, you know, the Gospel of Matthew, or, you know what I mean? Like, it's one of the harder ones.
There's a lot going on there,
and even
sure.
this, there's so much going on there. And all the way through, like, Job is like raging at God. You know, he's just raging and raging. And then right at the end, God like blesses Job and he affirms him. And it's because all of Job's questions, all of his hurt, all of his disillusionment, it always went upwards. It always went upwards. He never let it stay with him. He always sent it up to God. He prayed his way through chaos. And I think that really has been where it's been most formative to my relationship with God, is this absolute, like, just the kindness and the care of him, that I can rage and rage. I can be confused. I can whine. I can be, you know, because someone will still say something that upsets me and I go back to God and I'm like, why do you make this so hard? You know, like, I'm absolutely not above those moments. And still after those moments, he'll say like, but you sent it all upwards, and I carry those now. So I think that actually, which isn't the answer I thought I would give. I thought it would be more about how God has really affirmed that I'm right. But really it's about the moments where I'm scared that I'm not, and who he's been in those moments.
I love how you've described that so much, in terms of we don't have to sit with it. Like, actually, this is an invitation. And I think that is so encouraging.
Yes.
And it puts the onus on God. Is that big? It's not going to be ruffling for him to engage with my questions. Or
no, he is not intimidating.
Not at all. And that is so encouraging to hear that someone who's gone to the lengths that you have. And I think probably some of the toughest spaces, you find yourself finding yourself in that dynamic with him, and that closeness, that intimacy. And may that be encouraging for all of us. Don't step away. Don't step out. Like you say, stay. Yeah. Just stay. And you recently wrote an article for Seen and Unseen. You write for them, which is amazing, about the Parliament's floor tiles and Queen Victoria. Loved it.
Oh,
Absolutely loved
yeah.
it. If you've not had a look at it, please go and have a look at the article. It's on their website,
Yes.
Seen and Unseen. A great read. And you tackle again this issue of feminist theology, and then I'm going to, hopefully I've quoted this correctly, it's imaginative endeavor. Why is that so important for us to kind of put on our approach to when we come across this big term, feminist theology? Why is imaginative endeavor so important when we're looking at it through that lens?
Yeah. Oh, I love that article, but it was such a niche one that I was like, do you know what? The people who like this will click on it.
Yeah.
And the vast majority of people will scroll on by. That's fine.
Yeah.
So I am absolutely overjoyed to find you. Find one of the ones for whom that sucked them in.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah. So yeah, for context, we got to have an amazing tour recently around the Houses of Parliament, the Palace of Westminster. And basically we had this amazing tour guide called Barry Hall, and he just pointed out every part of that palace that has Christian underpinnings. And it's the whole entire thing. It's crazy. But what I noticed was there are tiles on the floor of oh my gosh, I can't remember what room it is. A room in the House of Lords. There's tiles on the floor where instead of the king's heart is in the hands of God, because it was built around the time of Queen Victoria, it's the queen's hands are in the heart of God. And that is feminist theology that we are still trying to rush to keep up with now. So it's so beautiful to me that that is centuries old. But anyway, to get to your question and not just ramble on. Yeah, so imaginative endeavor, I use those words. I do not mean imaginative as in fantasy, as in something we come up with in our own minds. What I mean when I say that feminist theology is an imaginative endeavor, because I think all feminism starts as an imaginative endeavor. And what I mean by that is we do the work in like our landscapes of thought. So there's a part of our brain, I'm going to call them our imaginative landscapes just to carry on the metaphor. So that part of our brain is where we ponder the existence of God, is where we ponder the meaning of life, it's where we ponder the meaning of us, the purpose of us, our relationship with the existence of God. It's where we create meaning. So, you have a memory from 5 years ago, you have attached meaning to that memory and you formed it into a narrative in a way that you might not have experienced it that way, but with 5 years of hindsight, you've connected meaning to it and you've been able to form it into this narrative that makes sense. And then you've slotted that amongst other narratives in your life. And that's how we make sense of our pasts. That's how we perceive our future. And it's how we hope. It's how we perceive our present, and it's how we hope for our future in those imaginative landscapes. And so feminism then, before we even get on to feminist theology, is working out, what does it mean for me to be a woman in 2023? What am I bringing to the table as a woman? What have I experienced as a woman? What do I need to fight for? What might be the struggles? And you're doing that in your imaginative landscape, and then you're enacting that in more tangible places. So, for example, a secular thing would be, in our imaginative landscapes, we decided that women should have vote, because they have minds, they have opinions, they have wisdom and insight, and they should be able to vote about who is governing them, who's in their government. That started as an imaginative endeavor. People realizing, actually, no, women need this, they deserve it, there is significance to women that is currently not reflected in our political system. And then that was enacted in practical places. And so feminist theology then is that, but we have the extra tool of God and of the Bible. So we have the extra tool that helps us of saying, I know from, the Garden of Eden that women were made to stand, eye to eye with men, that they were made to bring, to rule the earth and subdue it alongside men, that they were made a power to equal men. I know that in my imaginative landscape, in my landscape of thought. I also know it because of my experience and my history with God. I know it there. And therefore, that is what is going to fuel me to fight for women in the workplace, to fight for equal pay, to fight for equal opportunities. So that's what I mean when I call it primarily an imaginative endeavor.
I think that's such an important way to consider and even like pondering on it. And I think what also gets caught up in, I think, the mix of that and that's such goodness, and it sounds so healthy, and it's such an empowering space, both for men and women, to be able to look at that through what, feminism is, because I'm sure you'll agree that that's become quite a trigger word even amongst
Yes.
Christian circles now. What does feminism really mean? We've seen historically, society has shown us some extremes about what feminism is, and quite frankly, I think I've veered quite far away from the original actual term. And I think you quote one of my favorite authors, Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie, and she speaks about it is, and I'm going to ask you to explain exactly what it is from your academic point of view, that feminism isn't quite what I think people feel in the extreme sense. Do you want to share that a little bit? Because I think that really helps to settle and gives us a foundational space to even then move on to look at what biblical feminism also is in that light, and not in through the lens or the filter of what I think the world or secularism is telling us, which is a vast spectrum of things that in some cases go kind of away from this original idea.
Yeah. I should stop paying Chimamanda, really, because I quote her so often.
And understandably, she's great.
she's incredible. Yeah, so she this was a little while ago now. A good few years ago now, she just said feminism is the political, social, and economic equality of the sexes. Full stop. Done.
Nothing more, nothing less.
No, mic drop moment. And then that might be in people's kind of psyche because Beyonce used that in here. Yeah, she sort of like, you've got Chimamanda's amazing, beautiful voice speaking that over one of Beyonce's songs. I think it's flawless. And so that's kind of, that might be where you know it from, but that was Chimamanda. And yeah, that to me, I mean, being a Christian, I want to slot spiritual in there as well. But that to me has been my compass, really. I think that's it. I think it's no more, and I think it's no less than that. The complete and utter political, social, economic, and spiritual equality of the sexes. For me, what's quite interesting is being like, well, where do we get the notion that should exist? And different people will have different notions for that. Just like they have different notions for why human rights should exist, for why any kind of justice should exist. People come with different answers. My answer is that is what I see built into the blueprint of God's original design for human flourishing on the earth. It was so notable in the Garden of Eden, and it's been so notably absent ever since. That's been broken. There isn't that. And people will absolutely question me and say, are you sure? Are you overplaying it? No, I really don't think I am. And I've got an extremely privileged position. And if I'm feeling it, then my gosh, people in a less privileged position because of other things than me are feeling it to the nth degree. So go and ask those people, if that equality exists. And so that's what it is. It's that. And yeah, what's really interesting is I think I also write a column for Women Alive, and I wrote about notes from a Christian feminist because they do exist. Like people are like, how could you be one or the other? And I'm like, no, I am one because I'm the other. They totally exist. And I think I wrote there in one of the columns, that's my, it's feminism. You kind of have to dive deep and see how is that being worked out, and there's nuance to it and subjectivity, and it's personal and it's political, and there's disagreement within it, and there's intersectionality within it, there's chasms of difference and divide in it. So that is all happening. And like you say, you have people who have taken feminism and taken it in a way where actually we've run with it. And now what's quite interesting is some people are starting to think, actually, did that do more? Were we kind of fooled? Did that actually benefit us, or has that actually been to our detriment? And some people are starting to backpedal, and some people are like, no, we keep going in this vein. So that those conversations are starting to happen, and they're quite interesting to observe. I don't feel ready to jump into them yet, but I'm enjoying observing them. But I think it's essential that we pick a definition, and I have picked Chimamanda's definition because I can't find a better one. And even when we do the deep dives and we scrutinize and we analyze what's happening, and we have the tough conversations, that we still come up for a big gulp of fresh air of, wait, why am I doing this? What am I actually fighting for? And where do I get the grounds to fight for that? So yeah, it's a very interesting space at a very interesting time to be talking about those kinds of things.
And I imagine we will still be engaging with that as like life is progressing. And I think the
100%.
world is, I think, becoming more of a buzz place for these conversations. I can see it coming to the fore a lot more. It's coming to a head in many spaces, not just outside of the church, but particularly within it, because of these historical extremities, or these imbalances, or misconceived ideas of actually what it's supposed to be for at ground level. It'll be interesting,
it's going
involvement.
Yeah, well, I think we're asking the whole question now of what does it mean to be human? And so within that, if we're asking those questions, then that question will feed into, well, then what does it mean to be a woman? Like, what does it mean? What does feminism mean when we're asking questions such as what does humanity mean? So it's like, yeah, it's uncharted territory. I don't think we've been here before. And depending on how I wake up, what my mood is, whether it's a Monday or a Friday, I'm either extremely excited or a little bit fearful.
So we know that you're a writer, and we know that you have done incredible work as a journalist as well, but you're also the Re-Enchanting podcast co-anchor as well, along with Justin Briley. Is that correct?
Yeah.
And you've also interviewed one of our members within the family of Christians in media, Chena McDonald. God is not a white man, which is amazing. Yes. So we've got that connection there somewhat with yourself, and it's great to see all these kind of cross lines, particularly with those in the work of amplifying stories. How do you find the difference between doing the conversation in a podcast and navigating some of these issues in comparison to your writing?
Oh, what a great question. I think, so the podcast, the Re-Enchanting podcast with Justin Briley, that's the podcast that I co-host. It's an absolute joy. So every week we get a guest on who, most of them are Christians, but actually some of them aren't. They don't identify as Christians, but Christianity, there's something about it that they're drawn to, both personally and within their work. And they're fascinating conversations. They like right on the brink. They're like, I appreciate Christianity. I want to believe it. I think one of our guests, the historian Tom Holland, not Spider-Man Tom Holland, the other Tom Holland.
Thank you for clarifying that one.
Yeah, you're welcome. He said, everything I want to believe, I can't. So people who are right on the brink there, we get to speak to those people. The difference between those conversations and my writing is that every time, some of those conversations, you can't control as you are realizing right now, you can't control conversations. So if you're a bit of a control freak like I am, you can't control the content of a conversation when you're inviting a guest on. It could go anywhere and you can't control that. And that's been really good for me. For someone else to control where a conversation goes has been really good for me. And then just learning from other people, not relying on my own brain to come up with answers or to come up with questions, to come up with challenges or confirmations, but the brain and the history, the experiences of other people. So for example, our conversation with Chena McDonald, it blew my mind. And I have been thinking about it ever since. And there were questions brought up by that conversation that my brain would never have forced me to answer or even ponder. And the opposite, I learned things from that conversation, as with so many of them, that I could not have learned without colliding with that person in that way. And so I think conversations, their value is in that. It's when you get two people in a room who may not have encountered each other otherwise, and you just see what happens and the unpredictability of it. And actually, I should say there are three people in my case, because I have the wonderful Justin Briley by my side. And the conversations, you can't predict them and you can't force them. And some come up more fruitful, more enchanting, sort of to stay on my own brand, more re-enchanting than others. But oh my gosh, when they do, there's nothing like it. It's way better than writing the best piece you've ever written, because you couldn't have made it happen. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. I love how there is something I think quite unique in about when I'm on by myself and I'm writing something, the only conversation that's happening is me and an outpouring one way.
Yes.
what's happening in the environment of the podcast and even in this conversation, it's
Yeah.
you are sparking off one another, dynamic shifts, and there's no control over the potential as to what will be
No.
explored in it and the content. And also, it's not one way; it becomes mutually edifying in some. We're not going to leave that conversation by just somebody was depositing something. I'm going to have received something all in the
Yes.
same breath, and I don't know what that's going to look like, but it's exciting, thrilling. But like you say,
Yeah.
sometimes I'm like, I'm not really sure how this is going to go, but I think this is what keeps it relevant, because not women and men, humanity, we're just not linear beings. We're not static beings. We're ever evolving. Our world around us is also triggering off evolvements that we didn't even anticipate, because it's changing all the time.
Yes.
It's just the bravery.
Absolutely.
Are we willing to kind of turn up for the course? And I think that's so exciting.
Yeah, I think you're so right. And also, the conversations where I thought, to my shame, where I've thought, this probably won't land with me personally. Man, have I been wrong. So my favorite ever there are lots of favorites, and lots of favorites because they do land with me. So anytime I've got to speak to an author, if you've ever listened to them, I just turn into a fangirl. I just melt before people. But yeah, so obviously I've loved those conversations for obvious reasons, but actually my all-time favorite conversation was with Dr. Jennifer Wiseman. So she's an astrophysicist. She works for NASA. She's part of the Hubble team. And the way she spoke about the universe, now I could not know less. Like, I needed to put my cards on the table at the beginning of that conversation and say, you have to know I know nothing. So sorry. Like I was coming to that conversation empty-handed, and I left that conversation genuinely like praising God, like the universe, like this is beautiful. Like everything that came out of her mouth was hitting me in a way that has never happened before in my life, because my natural leaning is not towards astrophysics. Like I don't look up at the stars and see God in them. That's not my natural. Now I do. I've literally never looked at the night sky the same since. Like, I'm not even exaggerating. So it's this acknowledgement that there are parts of us that are left to be awakened. And that will only happen when we come into contact with people who are different to us.
100%. And just giving ourselves the opportunity to hear their story, or make space to facilitate a story that is so far away from our own. And I love that you do that.
Yes.
You definitely see this in your writing work for the Centre of Cultural Witness, where, from my understanding, it's really there as a purpose. And add to this, if I may, we're just going on what we know in our research, a Christian faith, to help Christian faith be better understood by the public. And this feels so much, I think that's the heart cry of most people occupying secular places, or places that are public, where we know that as kingdom believers and kingdom, commissioners, we want to ensure that our faith is understood. How can you encourage us to kind of implement that? You are someone that is doing it actively. You're executing it successfully as well. What could you say to our Christians in media community? Like, how can we do this? Give us some tools or advice, please.
Okay. Yeah. So the Centre for Cultural Witness, and I should just give them a shout out and kind of explain what we are a little bit. So we're headed up by Bishop Graham Tomlin in a former life, and he is our director. And he was really, as I think so many of us are, frustrated with how Christianity was being perceived and spoken about and received in public spheres. And if you're a Christian working in the media, then you get it. And I don't need to go any further than that. And he had this amazing, he speaks a lot about the 1940s, and that's really helped me. So he speaks about the 1940s as a decade, and he speaks about like C.S. Lewis and J.R. Tolkien, and he speaks about the journalism of Dorothy Sayers, and he speaks about the poetry of W.H. Auden and T.S. Eliot, and he paints this beautiful picture of that was a decade where Christianity was like beautiful and it was captivating, and people spoke about it with confidence and with clarity and with creativity, and imaginations were opened up and people were coming at it from all angles. And I always find that picture, that decade, whenever he brings that up, I find it super helpful, because I think my biggest encouragement, and I'm really learning this in real time, I don't have this at all figured out, I'm literally learning this on a day-by-day basis, I personally believe from my work, from who I've spoken to, is that if we're coming at it from a place of nobody wants Christianity, then actually I think we're working with outdated information now. I think we are. I'm like, don't get me wrong, like there's still work to do, but I am sensing an absolute hunger in people. Like I can, my co-host, Justin Briley, he's got a book, The Surprising Rebirth of Belief in God. So he's keeping a fascinating eye on intellectual levels. People seem to be seeing Christianity as a credible form of a credible source of intellectual wisdom. So he keeps his eye there. I will keep my eye on like the heart cries of culture, what I see culture crying out for, and I cannot not see Jesus in that. So I think firstly it would be confidence, and I'm preaching this to myself, but confidence that we have what people are looking for. We have answers to people's questions. We have it within us. So to come at it almost from a different foot, like we're not coming at this back-footed. I really don't believe we are anymore. We're not coming at this from a place where we need to be defensive. I'm not sure that like apologetics as we understood them 10 years ago are answering the questions that people are asking now. I don't think we need to come at it proving ourselves anymore. I think the people who do that, and they do it beautifully, and that's really helped over the past decade or so, but I don't think we're in that place right now. I think now it's not about defending Jesus, it's just about showing him and doing it with like a confidence that I really think we can have right now, because there is a Jesus-shaped hull, and I think people are waking up to that within them. So I think confidence would be the main thing in that. And also something that we are really, really working on is imagining. I've spoken about an imaginative endeavor. Yeah. We are really trying to work hard and to really think about how to be as creative as possible, really thinking out of the box, working with stories and art and poetry, and how can we work with those things? How can we point people to Jesus through those things? And music and all of these things. So I think creativity is key, but confidence would be my ultimate thing, to hear the heart cries of culture right now, to hear the heart cries of a generation, and to confidently say, well, I know I can point you in the direction of what your soul is longing for. I think that, I don't know if that fully answers your question.
Absolutely does.
That's where I'm at.
Absolutely does. And I think you made some really, really valid points there, and important considerations for us to look at, even how we're approaching. It hasn't left the commission to go into the world, preach the good news, tell people about Jesus, show him through our lives, hasn't changed. But I think you're absolutely right. It says, is it time for us to consider that what the harvest looks like right now is probably not where we thought it was in this very defensive space. And if I may point out, I think COVID actually really showed us that. Government systems, health, and just like economic situations couldn't really tell us anymore about purpose. It couldn't really be a place where we were sourcing credible security sometimes about what's going to happen to me next, because we were just in a position of the unknown. You saw such a surge of like, is there more then?
Yes.
Faith or hope? Is there something else besides that? Because we realized that we were given, or should I say rather, kind of like the idea of choice on certain elements that we took for granted all the time was taken away. And we were left in the four walls of, social distancing and kind of seclusion from everyday life that we just took for granted, and busyness.
Yeah.
And people were sitting there like, is there more? And I think this is such a great question to think about. If that may be the case, does this not require step up in my boldness and just being present, showing Jesus in my workplace, in the way that I'm navigating my relationships? Am I bringing Jesus to the fore in those moments, those interactions? Well, this has been an incredible conversation, and I want to thank you so much for your time with us. If you have been blessed by everything to do with Belle, as I am, please feel free to continue to pursue following her work. Check out Woman Alive that you've mentioned earlier. Seen Unseen for articles by Belle, and just listen to Re-Enchanting on all the podcast platforms where I find that it will be available. So, Belle, thank you so much for being with us today. God bless you. All the best in your future endeavors. It's exciting to watch just kind of what God is going to do through you and as a result of your work. Thank you just for your obedience to following your call towards him. It's been amazing. Thank you so much.
Oh, Carla, thank you. Should we do this every Tuesday? No,
Let's do
Wednesday. Should we
it.
do this every Wednesday?
Please come again. There'll be things
Yeah.
to talk about again. It'll be wonderful to have you. Thanks so much
Oh,
for being with us, Belle.
thank you for having me.
You've been listening to Faith in Media with Carla Adebekun. Make sure you catch our episodes and hit subscribe. Please share and leave us a comment. Christians in Media is a UK charity that supports, encourages, and inspires Christians from across the ever-changing media landscape. Find out more at www.christiansinmedia.co.uk and connect with us via our socials.